right, there we go. So we are live. We are going to go ahead and take just a few moments to let people get settled in there. While you guys are kind of joining us, tell us where you're joining us from, how you're doing today. All right, looks like we got a few people joining in, so it looks like we should be good to go. I'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Ben Jacobson. I am the digital marketing strategist here at Page One Power, and also the host of this series, SEO From Home. Before we get started, I did want to let you guys know real quick about our new link building ebook that we've put together. Many years of combined experience putting this together, and it shows you from start to finish basically the entirety of the process of link building. It's super helpful. It is free, so if you guys want to check that out, I'm going to drop that in the chat real quick. And if you guys are interested in checking that out, again, go ahead and do so. So I'll go ahead and drop that there. Sorry, guys, I'm new to Zoom chat apparently. All right, cool. There we go. And so today's episode of SEO from Home, we're super excited for. We're going to be joined by Francine Rodriguez, and we're going to be talking about Spanish PPC. It's something that we had a chance to chat about a little bit earlier on when we got a chance to kind of do the introduction call with Francine. And I'm really excited about this. And I think that you guys are going to get a lot out of it. And I think it'll kind of open up your ideas to maybe a little bit different perspective and a little bit different way of looking at some of your advertising strategies. So if you guys haven't joined us for SEO from Home before, the idea behind this series is to sit down with SEO industry leading experts and discuss a variety of topics inside of marketing. Today, as we're mentioned already, we're talking about PPC. It's a little bit outside of what we normally discuss, and that's actually one of the goals that we're starting to try to branch into is kind of blurring those lines a little bit and bringing more people into the fold so that we can understand how to kind of integrate things like PPC and SEO and maybe take some leaps from a book from PPC and apply it to our own wheelhouse, which is SEO. So all of that being said, we're super excited for today's episode. For today's broadcast, we are going to have a Q&A option as well. And a chat. So if you guys have questions, definitely pop those in the Q&A. If you guys have feedback, go ahead and drop those in the chat box there. Also, we're going to be live tweeting today. So if you guys have questions or if you have follow-up, you can also engage with us there. You can tag at Page One Power, or you can also tag Francine, which Francine, we have it here. It's Francine
18 PR.
Yes, ma'am. Got it. All right, cool. And be sure to use hashtag SEO from home. We're super excited. Francine, thank you again for joining us. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and what we can expect to be talking about today.
Absolutely. So let me start sharing my screen before I dive too deeply. Can everyone see?
Yeah, looks good. I can see here.
Excellent. So my name is Francine. I am so excited, and I thank you guys so much for inviting me here today. I know that the world of PPC may not be something that you're always talking about at, SEO from home, but I firmly believe we're cousins and we can learn from each other. And today I'll be talking to you guys about Spanish PPC and how it is the account boost that you didn't know you needed. So a little bit about myself. I'm a manager of customer success at WordStream, and I am from the beautiful island in the Caribbean of Puerto Rico. And you might guess it, my first language is Spanish, and that is a little bit about why I've gotten into this world. And this year, I had the great honor of being selected one of the top 50 most influential people in PPC. And another great honor that I've been able to achieve is I'm a Google for a Startup certified mentor. And I specifically work in Latin America. So I travel there a couple times a year for the last couple years, helping startups there getting started with their digital marketing for the first time. And it's such an awesome experience. I think it's the coolest thing that this industry has ever brought to me. And certainly I've learned a ton from those startups about why Spanish PPC is so important. And they just keep invigorating me to share more about this topic to everyone. So why don't we get started with the story of how this all began? The year was 2014, and I was brand new to WordStream. I think I was maybe 2 weeks in. I was sitting at my desk, new, you're shy, you don't speak up too much, and then I see like a chaos in the office and everyone was running around. I'm like, what is going on? They were all freaking out because a customer had been sold that only had Spanish campaigns and only spoke Spanish, and none of them knew what to do with it. It was, pretty funny to see. And one of the people was like, wait a second, isn't that new girl Puerto Rican? And I was like, yes, I am. Here I am. And it was like the cool superhero moment. I'm like, I can do this. But I had only been there 2 weeks and I was still pretty new to the world of PPC. So I stepped up to the plate. And literally with my first customer is how I broke into the world of Spanish PPC.
Wow.
It was like such a awesome experience, and then I remember asking everyone around me like, so like, what do I do, because none of you've trained me on this? Is there different strategies for other languages? Like, do you have any idea? And just blank faces. Not one of them knew what to do. No one had ever experienced this. And I was like, can someone Google something very quickly before I get on the phone with this guy? Nothing. So I'm like, I have an idea. I think I've carved my niche, not only in this company, but maybe in this industry. Um, I decided that any customer that would let me, and it was hard at the beginning because a lot of them would not let me, I was going to try and create Spanish campaigns for them. And I was just going to see how it goes. And from there, I created my own rule set, and I figured out, it's not that difficult. I don't have to reinvent the wheel here. I just use the exact same strategies I already do, and I just translate them. It was such aha moment for me. And the most important thing about this whole world is that I'm just trying to give folks trying to search in their native language a fighting chance to get access to information. That's what it all comes down to. So that's a little bit about how I broke into this world. So I do want to answer this question because I do get it a lot. Why Spanish over the other options other than you speak it? Well, totally fair question, because bilingualism is on the rise in the United States. In the last 30 years, more than double the population of bilinguals have grown in the United States. And the percentage of people speaking other languages at home has also increased quite a bit. So yes, there are tons of languages being spoken in the United States. It is not just Spanish. Um, so why Spanish again? Well, I want to answer one more thing before we get to that. It's a myth busting moment that I want to have, is that a lot of people think, bilinguals, they're only in major cities. You think about New York, you think about LA, but the reality is that there are bilingual people living in every area in every state of the United States. Is not just those metropolitan cities. So if you think that this strategy is only for those folks in those areas, you are wrong. This can work for anywhere in the United States. So back to answering my question, I think this map will very easily solve as to why Spanish is the most important language in the United States, because it is the most commonly spoken language other than English. And this doesn't mean that I'm saying, hey, don't try French in Maine, because clearly that's the most important language there. I'm all for it. Test it and go. I've actually tried to do campaigns in French and Italian and other languages. Not as successful as Spanish, I will admit, but I'm all for experimenting.
Yeah, it
And if
seems
you want,
my only
what?
option here is to try to help out North Dakota somehow. I speak a little bit of German.
Perfect. So that you can be that person to help out the North Dakota. I don't know who's going to help Alaska with you pick, because I've never even heard of that language before today.
No help there. Age One Power is going to dominate in North Dakota.
You can do it, man. I believe in you. I'm going to teach you how. And if you want to try other languages, fair. I'll also give you a little hint. I'm going to remove English and Spanish. And here is the map of the United States with the most spoken languages other than Spanish. So I know, Ben, you are located in Idaho. You're still good in German. There's going to be
Very
someone
good.
searching.
Good. All right. Maybe I'm probably a good portion of that subset of data that they're they're getting this information.
Yeah, so you're that one guy
Yeah.
in Idaho. Well, awesome. You are represented. Yeah. So now that
It's
I've
very sorry, I didn't mean to
mhm.
jump in front of you, but I mean it's very telling of like how predominant Spanish is, though. Like when you look at, you peel it away, and then like the next level, like it's that diverse.
Absolutely.
And when you look at something like German is the next most common spoken language in Idaho, and like anyone that's been to Idaho or anyone that's even familiar or even like heard jokes about Idaho can definitely understand why that seems so bizarre. I mean, there's a lot of farmland out here. There's a lot of just like rural areas. So like the idea of just a huge amount of people speaking German doesn't really make a huge amount of sense. So I mean, it's just super telling of like how like important that secondary language Spanish can be to so many different places all across the entire country, not
Yes.
just Texas and New Mexico and Arizona, like so many people tend to kind of think.
It's just a blanket everywhere. And I also know a little bit about Idaho. I've lived there as well. My parents live there now, so it's my second home. So I totally understand. I never thought that German would be so spoken there, but apparently it is. We just have to find that pocket of where.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on, now we know why Spanish is why we're talking about it today. Let's learn a little bit about who the Hispanic population is in the United States and why they're important in the world of marketing. So first of all, they are 60.5 million people. That represents almost 20% of the population of the United States. That's a big chunk of consumers. And my favorite fun fact that I learned is that the US has the second largest Hispanic population in any country in the world, only behind Mexico. That's just outstanding. Think about all the Latin American countries. We are a bigger population than all of them, and some of them combined. It's just huge. And we are the fastest growing segment of the population in the United States. 1 out of 2 people added to your population is Hispanic, and 1 out of 4 people younger than the age of 18 are Hispanic. Another fact is that the average age of Hispanics in the United States is 28. So this is prime consumer, very, very young, where the average age for all other ethnicities usually tends to be older. So the Hispanic people are definitely the future of this country and going to be a large segment of the consumers coming up and growing up.
Absolutely.
And Hispanics come from tons of places, many places of origin. Obviously, the number one is going to be Mexican or Mexican American. And number 2 is Puerto Rican like me. But we definitely come from tons of other places. But if you are creating campaigns, you definitely want to keep the Mexican population and the Puerto Rican in mind, depending on where you're located. And we'll talk about that later as to why that's important. Now, a little bit about the Hispanic consumer is that they control 1.5 trillion in buying power in this country. But more important than that is that this is up 212% from the last decade. So incredible growth. And product and service consumption has increased by 42% in the last decade for Hispanics buying. That's just a lot of purchasing going on.
Awesome.
And very important is that they're brand loyal. So we want to make sure that we become the brand that they love, because they will continue coming back and back and back to us. Now, when it comes to ads, this is my favorite part. This is for my PPC people. Hispanics pay attention to ads 66% more than all the other populations. And as a paid search person, this is like music to my ears, because we know people are not paying attention to ads. That's just a fact.
Yeah, absolutely. That's crazy. 66%. Wow.
Well, hold
That's
your horses, because I'm about to like blow your mind even more. 93% of people, of Hispanic people who recall seeing an ad, actually take action on those ads. That's a huge percent.
that doesn't even seem like a real number.
I know, but it comes from Google,
That's
so I trust them.
fascinating.
That is
Ooh,
a crazy amount of people paying attention and actually buying. And I'll say, I work in PPC, and I'm a Hispanic person. I should know the tricks, and yet I fall for them every time. I think it's like that nature in me. I can't stop myself from clicking on an ad and buying.
Yeah, it's crazy. I feel like you just maybe boosted the downloads of Duolingo of anyone that possibly listens. It's just like, oh, there, how much? What percentage?
Mm-hmm.
That's so crazy and fascinating. Uh,
Absolutely.
and someone was saying they would love to access the PDF of this afterwards. So maybe we can
Absolutely.
check
Yes,
it
we'll
out.
be sharing it.
Yeah, so we can definitely get that shared out for you. Thank you.
I'm
Yeah,
glad you're excited already. We're
that's
not
so
even
cool.
halfway through. All right. So the main question remains, why is no one talking to us? I just gave you some crazy amount of facts. There are a ton of Hispanic people in the United States. That's 20% of the population. I've just proven to you we got money and we love spending it, love spending it. So again, why is no one talking to us? Why is this such an untapped market in just digital marketing, any marketing really, but digital marketing specifically is just crazy. So let's talk about Espanol and PPC, but I could call this just Espanol in the search engine.
Hmm.
So the first thing is why we should be doing this is that there is a lot less competition. So on the left is what we typically see when we search for plumber open 24 hours. Everything above the fold is an ad, it's a map. This is what we're used to seeing. Now on the right is the same search in Spanish, zero ads.
So
That's crazy. When have you seen a plumber with no ads in Google? That's just almost impossible. And if you think about it, who doesn't want to be the only ad at the top of Google? And for a lot of people, you think that that's just a dream that will never ever happen. But it is actually a reality. You could be that person right now, being the 24-hour plumber for this search today. And for those of you thinking out this, and maybe it's like an old screenshot, this was from last night. As at a whim, I thought, I'm going to check this. And it was the first thing I checked, immediately got my screenshot.
wow.
So this is fresh data.
Geez, you're like printing your own money at that point if you can capitalize on those ads properly.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you mentioned money because that's the next thing we're going to talk about. You know,
I
cool, there's
swear
no
I didn't see the slide deck ahead of time.
I didn't show it to him. This actually, thank you.
No, it's super
um,
scripted, but tell us more about what we're gonna learn next. But I swear.
yeah, that was so funny. I was like, how did you know? Well, I think it's an obvious question because people think, okay, fine, there's no competition, but show me the money. How much am I going to spend on this? So you have a very natural reaction. So what I've done is I said, okay, how do I prove this? I'm going to go all the way to the top. So WordStream, my company, publishes this list every year, the top 25 most expensive keywords in Google. And I said, okay, I'm going to take those keywords and I'm going to investigate. I'm going to search what are the Spanish CPCs. So everyone listening, take a moment, write it in chat if you can. What do you think? Is it going to be about the same? Is it going to be higher? Is it going to be lower? Any guesses?
I mean, my mind's so blown at this point that I feel like I need to guess like a negative number. Like Google is gonna pay you to put your ads out there.
That would be awesome, but I don't think
I'm
that's going to be the reality quite yet.
I'm gonna guess half, or no, I'm gonna guess no, that's too much. I'm gonna guess it's 75% of the cost of what the English CPC would be.
Okay, that's a good guess. Well, everyone at home,
Everyone else, throw
hopefully,
your chat and guess, or your dyslexic today. Throw your guess in chat if you guys got one. I'm
if you
really
got,
curious to see too, just because it seems like, I mean, again, all of this is so crazy to me. So someone saying they're guessing 50%, another person saying they're guessing a third of the cost for lawyers.
all right, you guys ready?
We got third, 75%, 50%. I feel like we got the board covered.
Well, let's see. What do you
Wow.
guys think?
Jeez. So it's like basically like a quarter in some cases.
Yeah, well, look at
Or
loans. Let's just
loans. Yeah,
focus
loans
on
is,
loans.
jeez,
Imagine if
10%.
your CPC is $40 a click. How do you compete with that if you're a small person? You can only compete if you're a big name brand.
I've been
And
trying to
this
get
is
my hair transplant with keywords to strike, and now I got my secret sauce. That's crazy. That's such a difference.
it is such a difference. It's a fraction of the cost and sometimes an extreme fraction of the cost. And I could keep searching for keywords all day. Usually this is what you'll see. It'll always be less. Um, and yes, one question I get asked a ton is like the volume the same? No, not always. But think about the fraction of the cost that you're spending. I have tons of customers that I only work with small businesses, and they get outbid every time, and they have a really hard time competing. When I introduced Spanish CPC to them, they finally had a fighting chance on the SERP, which is awesome for a small business who are trying to compete against these like Goliaths. So I'm glad you guys liked this slide. Moving on, and I think this is a great reason, and it may not affect the bottom line of your business, but I think it's equally important. Imagine if you're trying to search for information online and you cannot find quality information in a language you can understand. That's really difficult. That sucks. Well, as a digital marketer, we can help people get access to quality information. And this right here is one of the few things that we can do to make sure that our online world is more inclusive. And I'm going to repeat this over and over throughout this presentation. Representation matters. And it's not just about our physical world. We're doing great job there, but no one's talking about the digital world.
100% agreed. That was the part that I alluded earlier. I can't remember if it was before we started the show or not, but I was talking with my fiance this morning about how excited I was for this episode. And it's it's really interesting because it strikes home pretty good for both of us. Like my fiance actually works in a medical clinic here in Boise that serves a community that is almost exclusively like new arrivals to the country, like people that are in like low income communities, like people that are just needing extra help.
Mm-hmm.
And so often that like she's talking with people from Somalia, like people from Iran, like all over the world. And like the thing that she talks about almost every day is just like the language barrier. And it's like she said it's so difficult for so many people to get like acclimated because like they can't find what they're looking for. And like when she's talked about that, and like we've talked about this before when I mentioned when we first kind of had our introduction call, it's like that's crazy to me. Like it never really like fully resonated. Like I knew it in my mind, but it never fully resonated. Like there's not search results for things that are in other languages, specifically if you're in like a region that doesn't have that as the primary language. Like
Yeah.
it's bizarre, but at the same time, like it opens up like this opportunity to like, actually speak to people that are trying to understand what it is or hear what you're trying to say.
Yeah. Everyone needs goods and services.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone. And you are going to get chosen if you can speak to me or even
Literally.
try.
Yeah.
Try.
And it's great. I mean, I've experienced it in such a smaller capacity. I mean, I've traveled to Asia, and I spent a few months in Europe and stuff like that. And I specifically, I was in Thailand. Like I didn't speak English, and I was super fortunate that like a lot of people there have some English. But like there's a lot of areas that I was traveling to because I was just kind of backpacking around, where it's like they don't speak any English. And like my really really poor broken tourist Thai was not very good, but like I can tell you like they were so welcoming and like willing to try to understand what was going on, like that it was super eye opening. And I was like, man, this is what it'd be like to be, someone who's new in America.
Yeah.
And like I know that it's like seems like such a strange like, oh well duh, but it's once you actually experience that, like it is like it really does kind of like resonate, if that makes sense, after a
Yeah.
certain period of time where you're like, oh okay. And then it kind of like clicks a little bit. But this is one of the things that when we first started talking about this, I was like, this is what I want to do. I think this is such like an important point to bring up too. So
Absolutely. And I'll keep repeating it many, many times today. Um, so I think we've convinced all of you. You're here with me. Maybe not PPC, but you guys in the SEO world are like, we should try this. So for a brief moment, I will be talking about how to start your PPC campaigns. And I'll say this, it's not anything groundbreaking. You know the strategy, you know your structure, you already know what you're doing. There's just a few nuances that I want to review when doing things with multiple languages. So the first thing is each language that you want to test should have its own separate campaign. This should be obvious. We want to follow the scientific method. We don't want to touch what's working. We just want to try and experiment, see what this new variable is going to do for us in its own separate world. The next thing a lot of people ask is, what should be my starting budget? I believe that 20 to 30% of what you regularly spend on a campaign is a really great budget to start with, because that gives you enough of a pool to see, is this going to be a good strategy for me? You can scale up and scale down. And as we know, the CPCs are cheaper, so we don't need as big as a budget to do a similar impact.
Yeah, you might even end up getting more reach for
Yeah,
less money using
absolutely.
a quarter or a fraction of your budget. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yep. And when you are creating your campaign in the settings, a lot of people ignore the language settings, but I like to make sure and do the point to put in my main language and my test language in those campaign settings. The reason for that is, like, if you are targeting the United States, the main language is English. We don't know what the browser settings for each person is going to be. And in a Hispanic family, let's say with kids and adults, the kids most likely might want to have their devices set up in English. The adults might want to have their devices set up in Spanish, but everyone uses each other's devices. So we just want to make sure we're covering our bases here by putting on both. And this is more for those folks who are in this presentation because they're considering going international. Remember that if you are setting up an ad schedule, you have to consider the time zones, and each network works differently. So Google, when you set up an ad schedule, is basing the time off where your account is located. Or Bing, when you set up an ad schedule, is based off where the user is located. And remember that 9 a.m. in Spain is not going to be 9 a.m. in Boise, Idaho.
True.
So this is something a lot of people forget when setting up their ad schedules.
I had a question for you just on
Mm-hmm.
that last slide. So you were saying when you set up your campaign. So just to clarify, this is for setting up your Spanish test campaign, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're setting English as the primary and then Spanish as the secondary, or was that just because it was alphabetical order?
It's just alphabetical
Okay.
order. There's
Okay.
no
Great.
primary or
So
secondary here.
okay, cool. I just wanted to confirm that and make sure that there wasn't.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And so the next thing that we do is our keyword research. But you guys, good news. It's already done. You did it. You already know what your top performing keywords are. And you already know your structure, as I said. So what you're going to do is just pick your top 30, 50 keywords, the ones that you want to experiment with, and then you're going to translate them. But you're going to keep everything the same. So now we're going to talk about the hardest part of Spanish PPC, which is universal for whatever sort of marketing you do, is the translation. This is where the hard work begins, because everything else you already know how to do. All right, there are three options with translating. One, you get a professional to do it. That's awesome, but that costs a lot of money. And if you're constantly doing different campaigns, it's going to add up. It's not going to be a reality usually for most of us. Then there are the two do-it-yourself options. So there's the do-it-yourself, like truly do-it-yourself, or have a Francine in your business, because I have become the unofficial translator for any customer in WordStream. And I don't mind it because it doesn't take me a ton of time to do that. Usually a keyword list will take about 10 minutes. It's not even that. And then is the DIY with help, which is what I'm going to concentrate on, because even me as a Spanish speaker, native Spanish speaker, I like to use the tools to make it faster, make sure that I'm doing the right job. So the main tool that I use, believe it or not, is Google Translate. It does a great job. It's really easy. It's free. I only use the Google Translate, like the actual translate.google.com or whatever it is, when I'm doing a few keywords, like 2 or 3, or when I'm checking something really quickly. If I have a large data set, I actually use Google Sheets. And this is a little hack that I learned on Twitter that changed my life. So thank you to Jake Miller Tech, wherever you are a godsend. In Google Sheets, there is this translate function where you can pick an origin language and then the language that you want to change it to, and it'll automatically translate any data set that you have.
That
So you
is
can translate
cool.
all your keywords, your ads in like a minute.
That's super cool. And that utilizes the same, I'm assuming the same engine that Google Translate's using. So
Exactly.
wow, that's so cool.
I know, it's like the coolest thing, and it does it so quickly. Um, it just really saves a ton of time. So I use it myself when someone gives it to me. Or what I've been doing at WordStream is when someone needs to translate, I say, throw it into Google Translate. I taught everyone how to use this little sheet, give it to me, and then I'll give it like a second view because that will take me
Yeah.
1 minute.
Yeah, and if you are doing the option where you're doing professional help, like that could even be one way to try to cost save a little bit. You can at least maybe get the bulk of the work out of the way, and then maybe offload that to someone who maybe is a little bit more proficient. That's so cool
Absolutely.
though. I expected like some sort of Google Chrome widget add-on that slows everything down, and there's a paid version and all that stuff. So that's super cool. That's just built in like that.
This is all free stuff.
Fantastic.
Yep.
That's so
So
cool.
this is, if I teach you one thing today, this is it, pretty much.
Instead
Um,
of translating random spreadsheets and sending them
yeah,
to work. Like,
and
you
it
know
does
how to
have,
translate it back now. It's not that hard.
yeah, you can translate to all these languages, and there are more options than the one on this orange box. You can just, if you Google, there's a list of every language available.
Cool.
All right. So I do have to take a moment because I said the translations were hard, and I just showed you two very easy things. Well, there's a trick to this. It's not always one-to-one. So to use a very controversial word in the Spanish language, I'm going to use this example of the word bus. And yes, bus is controversial. The reason why bus is controversial is depending on where you're from, the word bus is totally different. So Google Translate will usually go with what the official word would be, which would be Spain. They invented the language, fine, they can get the official word. Bus is autobus, makes sense. But if I'm someone from Argentina and I'm Googling to rent a bus, I'm going to probably put colectivo. Or if I'm from Mexico, I'm going to put camión, buseta, carrito. There's so many different ways to say this. And it's not just the word bus, and it's not just even amongst countries. I'm from Puerto Rico. It's an island that is 100 miles wide by 35 miles. That's teeny tiny. And depending if you're from the north or the south, we fight over words.
Hmm.
Like even in a tiny small space. It doesn't mean that I don't understand what the word autobus means. I get it. I know what it means. But when we search in Google, we search how we talk. We use our natural language, not the official words for things. Maybe in the second try, when we can't find the information, we'll try the fancy version, right? But we usually just put questions or phrases. That's how we're searching.
So,
So, mhm,
real quick, just to jump in, I've been also admittedly trying to brush up on my Spanish ahead of this, but like just thinking about it, like for example, like Duolingo, like they have Spanish in there, and it teaches like autobus, but
mhm.
like with that, like how you mentioned like you understand what that means in Spanish, but like how much of the crossover is acceptable versus like how much of it is like you might be completely, excuse the pun, but like speaking a different language, like
Yeah.
how much of it was like there's a disconnect there, and is there like a really solid way to like double check that like based on region, or how can you kind of combat that?
Absolutely. So I actually have an example thinking about this. So let's say you are a bus rental in Florida. You're trying to hit Spanish speakers. Florida, like in Orlando, you're going to the theme parks. Orlando is basically mini Puerto Rico.
Mhm.
You know, it is very obvious within the regions what is the biggest national origin. We kind of talked about that at the beginning of the presentation. Here's where it comes into play. You should be aware about who's around you because it's not just Spanish people or Spanish speaking people. It's going to be in Orlando, it's going to be Puerto Ricans.
Mhm.
In Miami, it's going to be Cubans. In Texas, it's going to be Mexicans, most likely, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yes, you should put the official word that Google Translate gives you. But you should, if you have the knowledge that in Orlando everyone's Puerto Rican, try the keyword guagua, which is how I search, like, or in how I speak. The word autobus will never be the first thing that comes into my brain ever.
Yeah.
So it is a little bit of an art and a science of knowing who's around you, and that's why I always, my next piece of advice is, if you can, have a native speaker help you out, someone around you who can give you a little bit of that advice. But if you don't have someone to give you that advice, there are some unusual places to ask for help. So the first one would be Twitter. So this is an example from this week. This woman, Christina Constantini, she's a documentary filmmaker, and she was just asking on her Twitter, look, I'm a second generation Spanish speaker. I don't know how to say tag us in your post. Who can correct this? And I very kindly wrote to her and like, hey, you this was correct, but you made a tiny mistake. And in that thread, tons of people responded. And it was actually a really awesome thread about how in the community we love to help each other. So that's the first place you can go to. The second place is just Reddit. Reddit has a translator community from people from all over the world. So if you don't know the nuances of a language, and if you're concerned, then you can certainly check in some of these unusual places as well if you don't have a friend who can help you out.
And Reddit is a savior. There's so many things on there that are like so fantastic, and it's such a broad uh, piece of valuable, like, just asset. Like, there's so much there that you can derive as far as like just like really good resources like that.
Yeah. So one of my friends from high school is she's a linguist professor in the University of Puerto Rico, and I asked her like, how do you do this? Like, how do you get information? And she's like, Reddit. I'm like, genius, thank you. So there you have it, some unusual places. So now I'm going to talk to you about two examples of when you don't have a friend, and maybe you should have had one. So oh shoot, one more question before we get there. I forgot about this. Is I do get this question a lot. What about my landing page? Should I translate that as well? Well, I'm of the you don't have to. First of all, because only 1 in 5 Spanish speakers will actually leave the page if they didn't find it in the language that they were looking for. And two is that if you've never searched online in different language websites, Google Chrome has this awesome little plugin that comes in automatically that it'll say, hey, do you want to translate this page? And it will automatically translate it completely for you. So I don't think it's necessary. I think if you try this out, it does really well for you down the line. In an ideal world, yeah, have a translated landing page. That's awesome. But if you can't get to that, don't let it stop you from trying this at all. All right. So time to write the ads. So I know that translating some keywords can be, it's not super difficult, but when you get to the ads, you're like, how do I do sentiment? This is just a little bit harder. And I'm really scared because what if I don't know Spanish? Like, this is a very scary thing.
Yeah, that was
Well,
kind of my first thought, is like, I don't understand the nuances enough to feel really confident like spending money and like putting our company's name out there like tied to this. Like, I don't want to, have a Ich bin ein Berliner like JFK moment where it's like, you don't want to sound like a fool. So like,
you, true. You don't want to sound like a fool. So I have some good news for you. Representation is actually more important than translation. 88% of Hispanic people will pay attention to the ads that they're already paying attention to more than anyone when the ad includes an aspect of their culture. So it does not have to be translated. You just have to want to try.
okay.
So yes, in an ideal world, you want that ad to be 100% Spanish. That's great, because then I can get fully the information I need right from the SERP. But it's also okay to do something like this, where I lovingly call it Spanglish, where you do 50-50, a little bit of the ad in English, a little bit of the ad in Spanish. That's okay too. I'm still comfortable working with you. I'm still getting the information that I need, and I know that you are willing to work with a Spanish speaker.
On that note,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned that it's pretty rare for people to leave if it isn't entirely in Spanish. So going back to that, one of the very early slides on, like, what percentage would you say of this audience is only Spanish speaking? On this note, if you mix in Spanglish and show that you're trying to give them at least context of what's going on there and like point them in the right direction, how does that fare in comparison to something where maybe just the headlines in Spanish and the rest is in English?
I got that answer for you in just a second.
Guys, I swear I didn't see this slide deck beforehand.
I promise you it's
You're
coming up.
answering all the perfectly natural questions that I'm just like, I'm trying to wrap my head around too. So cool.
Yeah. So stay tuned for one moment, please. So to finish kind of this thought, as I said, it's ideal 100% translated. Okay, 50% translated. But I'm going to go further. I think it's fine to have it all in English, actually. And these 3 examples I just shared with you all came up to me when I was searching in Spanish online. So again, think about it. Even if you're the only ad and it's in English, but I was searching for it, you're still at the top. You're still number 1. People will more likely want to click on you, even if it's all in English, because they know, fine, I can't get all my information in the language I want. So to answer your question, literally right here is how people are using Spanish language at home versus how they're using it online. So as you can see, at home, the majority of people are speaking exclusively in Spanish or in Spanglish bilingually. But online, they have to shift their habits. They have learned time and time again, I'm not going to find the info I want, so I need to search a little bit more in English. But there's still people trying. There's still people who are searching first in Spanish and then switching over to English, or still trying to search in Spanish. 16% are like, no, I'm still going to search for this and I'm going to try my best to get that information. And so the main point here is like 2 things. Online, what we want to do is we want to try to close that gap, right? There is a big difference, and we just want to make sure that we are reaching those folks who are still trying. And again, it's just catching the eye of those who are bilingual and saying, okay, you're trying and I'm here and I'm trying too. And I do see a question.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up, and
Yeah.
that was actually fantastic question, Courtney. I actually had this written down to some capacity myself here, and I'm assuming that you were going to address this in some capacity at some point, but very similar to the question I had. Do you have bilingual employees or representatives to do the Spanish ads? And what if all the employees only speak Spanish? I'm thinking you're meaning if they only speak English, then it does not make sense to do a Spanish ad. So for example, page 1 power, let's say, for example, no one in our company spoke Spanish. That's not the case, but if that were the case and we're advertising and bringing in leads that are in Spanish, and maybe those people, I mean, this example here kind of shows that there's still a fair amount of people that are bilingual, or at least still be able to communicate with you, but their search intent starts and begins in Spanish in a lot of cases. So how would you, like, does it make sense to be advertising if you don't have like a built out, like, functioning Spanish sales team or something along those lines? And Courtney, definitely correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misrepresenting your question, but I think that's kind of what you were trying to get at there.
Yeah. Super fair question. She says, you're right. I firmly believe that even if you don't have anyone in the company who can speak Spanish, you can still gather these leads. Because going to the very first example of my day 1, that person who only spoke Spanish got sold in English and got to me.
Yeah.
Like, the person searching knows, look, I'm in the United States, I'm working with American companies, I understand that the business language is English, but I'm still going to try to find this information first in Spanish. And that's what we're trying to do. We're just going to try to provide the information and say, look, I want your business, I'm here willing to work with you, I can't speak Spanish, but I'll try my best to get you some quality information so that you trust my brand and come use my service, use my product.
And I think it kind of relates back to something that we even touched on briefly before, and it's like the idea of you're making an effort, like you're trying, like the idea this you've mentioned it a bunch of times, or honestly, but like the idea of Spanglish even is like another example of like you're at least trying, like even if you use autobus instead of like a different translation, like you're still trying. Like I think
Hmm.
um the so much of everything about marketing is about intent. Like what is the intent here? And the intent is that you're trying to help people find what they're looking for in whatever capacity or whatever industry that is. The other thing too, I think, is something that, again, I was talking to my fiance about this, and she said another thing that so many people are expressing to her is like alienation. Like they don't necessarily feel super warm and welcoming. I don't know if you guys know this, but our country isn't the
Absolutely.
most welcoming place sometimes. So, I mean, like in that capacity, like she's like, I just want to do what I can to make them feel like, hey, you're welcome here. Like I'm willing to try to help you. And so I
Yeah.
think that same sentiment can be very quickly like applied to something like this, where it's like, sure, I don't speak fluent Spanish, but like I'm willing to like try to help you guys. Like I think that my business or the service that I'm providing is the best. And so I want you to use my service because I'm the best, but I want to make it accessible to you, not just because you happen to speak a different language, that's no longer accessible to you.
Yeah.
And so I think just trying to open that door and allow people to see like what's best. Like inside of the SEO space, like we constantly champion the idea of the best content will rise to the top. What's answering the best questions? What's making the most sense? What's answering the intent for what that searcher is looking for will rise to the top. But if the person is searching for something in a different language that's you're not paying attention to, then you're not going to be able to rise to the top because again, you're not making that door open.
No.
So I mean, to maybe answer my my own kind of question there, I guess, but I think that's really important, and it's something that we talked about, I think briefly when we were talking earlier, is just kind of the idea of just because you can't do 100% doesn't mean that 5% isn't super like telling of where your direction's going.
Yeah. And like what you're saying, coming to the United States is very intimidating. You're hearing me right now. I came here the first time when I was 16, and then the second time when I was 24. My English is what I would consider perfect, and I was still scared, and I was still overwhelmed, and just seeing my native language anywhere gave me like a sense of ease, like, oh, okay, I feel a little bit a tiny the door is slightly open for me to go through. It's just a tiny thing. Even the even if everything else is in English, but you could talk to someone in Spanish and put se habla español, that's just the tiniest thing to make us feel welcome, if you
And
can do it.
and Courtney, I'm not sure if maybe it's the instance where your company doesn't have someone there that speaks Spanish. I think that's probably um, I'm sure it happens pretty regularly. There's smaller companies that maybe doesn't have someone. There's so many options too available. Like if you end up like contact or you end up finding a lead and they speak Spanish and maybe they have some English, but maybe they're just more comfortable. Like there's options, like there's language line, which is like I think you might have to pay for it, but it's like a tele interpreter services. Like you can use Google Translate. Like Google Translate itself has like an app on your phone where you can push a button and you can talk, like just like set it down on the table and you can literally talk to it, and in real time without touching any more buttons it just like automatically translates it as if there's a person translating for you real time. It's not perfect,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, but it will definitely, again, it shows that effort that you're making of like, oh, this person actually wants to talk with me.
Yeah, and we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for effort. And I'll go for I've seen a sales guy at WordStream sell through email through Google Translate. I've seen him
Awesome.
do it because I get his customers for a long time before we put some rules. That was in the startup days. But effort, the tiniest effort, you got it. You got my business.
That's awesome. Cool.
All right.
Great question, Courtney. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. All right. So I promised you some examples of a little bit of a disaster when you don't check your work. And just think these are fun to share always. So something you should know about Hispanic people is that we take no prisoners and we love to roast a good mistake. So this is McDonald's. I'm sure you've seen these. They've been creating like these meals with celebrities, where the celebrity creates like their combo, the favorite stuff that they have at the restaurant.
Yeah.
And so J Balvin is like a Colombian artist. And they wrote, "Oh, the J Balvin meal has arrived," which is Jego with two L's, but this one was spelled Lego, like a Lego. And so my friend from college, who I hadn't spoken to in years, put this on Facebook, and the whole comment section is just fully roasting them, which is a little fun for us. But you don't want to be that person on the other side, like,
Sure.
yeah, I made a mistake. And further than that, you don't want to insult your customers. So in this example, this is from Kmart. They were doing a Mother's Day sale. I think they were playing with the word namaste. And no, they were not trying to reach the Hispanic audience per se, but the Kmarts are mainly one of their main target audience is Hispanic women. So much so that in 2011, they actually created a telenovela on YouTube about Kmart to try to attract more of this audience because it's so valuable to them.
No way.
Which is
That's
really
awesome.
weird. But it was called,
Interesting marketing technique, but I like
right?
it.
It was called Madres y Comadres, which is about mothers and their friends at Kmart. I don't know.
Bold. I like it.
Weird, but cool, I guess. And kind of going back to this example, their main audience is Hispanic women, and this word here in Spanish, I will not translate it for you, but let's say the eggplant emoji is involved, and it was a huge mistake on their part, huge. And We Are Me Too, again, we love to roasted them endlessly for putting this. So We Are Me Too is like Hispanic influencers for young people. Yeah, you don't want to be this person either.
Yeah, rough. Take a lesson from them.
Yes. So kind of moving on to other strategies that are very important. I'm going to tell you the story about a typical Hispanic family, which is mine. This is my family. And this is how we like to post our family on social media. But this is actually what our family gatherings look like. Everyone is on their phone the whole time, from the youngest person in my family to the oldest person in my family. And this is very typical of a Hispanic family because we spend 2 more hours per week on smartphones than all other demographics. So what does this mean for our world? We need to make sure we have our mobile strategy set up. So this means make sure that website is optimized for that mobile traffic. Review your bid adjustments and make sure that you're bidding up a little bit more on mobile because that's where you're going to capture this audience. Use all those extensions so that you can push your competitors down, especially those mobile specific ones. And if you have Spanish speakers who can talk to folks, definitely consider call only ads. That would be a great strategy. And another great strategy. Oh, sorry. And one thing that's great for mobile is that Hispanics use it as their second eyes while shopping. 83% of Hispanic people on their phones are on the store making sure that they're getting the best price and that is the best product that they want. So we're shopping while we're shopping. So make sure that you are very mobile optimized. Now, our next strategy here is video. So YouTube, as I said, is very important. So much so that Kmart created a telenovela just to get more people to Kmart. Well, Hispanics watch YouTube more than any other cable network in the United States. That's huge. This also includes Telemundo and Univision, which is very surprising because those are on my house all day. Like more than any other network. Like think about that. That's a lot. So how they watch is also very interesting, and I've used my family here as an example. The majority is watching the content in English most of the time. So if you are interested in getting into more YouTube, creating the content in English is perfectly fine because 60% of Hispanics are watching it in English. And that would be someone like my cousin Andres. He grew up in the United States, so most of his digital content, he does it in English. But I would say in the last couple of years, he's kind of switched over more to where I am because he had kids and he really wants to include his culture for his kids. So now he's on YouTube Kids and watching Spanish videos all the time for his children. And then you have someone like myself, I represent the 30%, where I watch and I consume my digital media equally in both languages. Because I grew up there, I didn't move here till I was an adult. And so I like to make sure that I keep both languages as part of my life, and I like to consume content in both equally. And then you have that 12%. As someone like my mom, she's lived in the United States for more than 10 years, but she still only consumes everything online in Spanish. So that's a little bit about how we watch on YouTube. So what does that mean for ads? We just want to make sure that we're on YouTube, um, especially because again, we love shopping with our phones, and we love shopping with YouTube. 75% of us are on YouTube first, learning about a product, and we are doing that on our phones. So kind of combining the last two strategies here a little bit.
Wow, that's crazy. That's 75%. That number is really interesting to me. 75% want to learn about a product and they'll go to YouTube first.
Correct.
Crazy. That's fascinating. Like
Yeah.
that kind of gives like a real boost to the idea of like product review channels and stuff like that. Like how massively influential and important those are. Um,
Yes.
get your reviews in, guys.
Get your reviews in.
Awesome.
And as I said, you don't have to necessarily do them in Spanish, but there's not a lot of reviews in Spanish out there, so you have an opportunity. Um, and then, you know, I want to give an example of a good channel that's doing a great job. Pero Like is a division of BuzzFeed that creates English content, but about Hispanics. Um, and I think it does a really great job if you want an example of how to mix both and how to mix culture with just doing everything in English. But I also want to point out that while I was watching my YouTube videos, because I love Pero Like, I saw this ad for this movie Ma, and it was in Spanish. I'm like, what a great job, because I'm watching this video in Boston. I'm watching a video in English, and I usually like I'm in ads all day. I'm one who like tries to ignore things, but they immediately captured my attention because they're trying to speak to me in my language. I'm like, good job, and screenshot for a future presentation.
And do you have, what about like your Chrome settings? So you're being displayed that, do you have your Chrome settings set to Spanish, or are they
No,
only tracking that based off of the content that you're currently consuming?
only based on the content. Have nothing set up in Spanish. Everything I have is set up in English. I'm that person that confuses YouTube, so I love being the guinea pig. And whenever I find things like this, I immediately take pictures of it.
Nice. Awesome.
Yep. And I have to take a moment and have you have to remember that the most watched video on YouTube of all times is in Spanish, and it is Despacito from my fellow countrymen, Luis Fonsi and Daddy Yankee, with over 7 billion views. So Spanish is here and it's growing. And if that's the number one video on YouTube, think about it. There's so much more growth to be had there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's so much other facts. If you look at like the top 10 videos in the last decade from YouTube, a ton of them are in Spanish as well. So an opportunity for you guys. So this is it, guys. This is the recap. I know that I love Spanish, but I hope that you guys love it too now. And so I just wanted to review everything that we've talked about today. So the first thing is that Spanish speakers are a growing and valuable target market. Please don't ignore us. And that you don't have to stress out and reinvent the wheel. Use the same strategies that you're using now, just translate them. Make sure that we feel seen and included in that ad copy. And if you're scared to do it in Spanish, that's okay. Do it in English. Just try to talk to us just a little bit. Open the door. You don't have to open it completely. Just put it adjacent. We'll walk in. And having a mobile strategy is key because that's where we're spending most of our time online. And use video, especially if you're in the e-commerce space. Use those product description videos. They're going to be very helpful for you in getting some new brand loyal users. All right. So muchas gracias. And now I'm ready for any questions that you guys have.
That was awesome. Thank you so much for that, Francine.
Yeah.
It was, again, just as insightful and even more so than I expected. So thank you so much for that. You guys, I apologize. I totally was going to post this in the very beginning, the top of the show. But this is a little bit older article that Francine put together, still super relevant. I know that we had some asks for the PDF. This does have some of that information in there. So this is another great resource for you guys to check out. We're also going to put together, we'll grab, it sounds like we can grab the slide deck from you. And then
Yes.
we're also going
Yes.
to be posting the recording of this as well. I know someone was mentioning they had to step away for a little bit. So if you guys do have to step away or you want to review some of this, which I highly recommend, we'll have that up. Usually we try to get it about 24 to 48 hours. So we should hopefully have that up before the weekend for you guys. Looks like we do have, let's see here. Oh, Courtney says, thank you so much. Thank you, Courtney. Again, that was a fantastic question. It was one that I've been kind of thinking about in the back of my mind too, as far as not having someone specifically in-house. So again, that is awesome. Looks like we hit just the top of the hour. It's like you had a stopwatch or something. It was perfect.
I try.
Looks like we got all of our questions answered. That was incredible. Thank you so much for putting that together. Like I mentioned, I really thoroughly enjoyed that, and I think it's really insightful, and I think it's cool to kind of bring additional people into the fold to try to help include everyone and make sure that we're finding, or I guess helping provide what people are looking for and helping people find that. So awesome. Thanks again. We look forward to having you back.
And thank you so much for giving me this platform to talk about this. It's something that I love speaking about, and the more I share it, I think the more this will change.
Agreed. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys for joining in with us. If you have any other questions or if you have anything else you'd like to talk to us about, again, reach out to us. We're always available and always happy to chat with you guys. Thanks again. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks,
Thank
Francine.
you.
See you guys.